Thank you very much for joining us today to talk about your campaigns for Multnomah County Commission. I am going to ask each of you to start off by telling us a little bit about why you're running and why voters should pick you as their commissioner. And why don't we start with Julia Brim-Edwards as the first candidate to talk to us.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Julia Brim-Edwards. Thanks for having me, and I'm here to ask for the Oregonians' endorsement. I'm running for county commission because our home community has been a safe, affordable, thriving place to live, and it's under great stress right now. Crime, gun violence, and homelessness are at record levels, and we have a humanitarian crisis on our streets. District 3 is especially impacted, and many of our neighbors more severely than other places in the city. The county's headed in the wrong direction, and urgent action is needed. But the good news is the county is in a unique position to improve things, and I know I can help the county get back on track by leveraging my skills, experience, relationships to take on these big problems, as I have for the last 20 years as a community and business leader. I have a strong record of building coalition to tackle big issues and delivering results. A couple of examples: I provided business and community leadership on marriage equality, passage of the Student Success Act, and twice in 2001 and 2017, I stepped in to help PPS get back on track when it was in crisis. Those are some examples of things I've done as a community leader. But it's also important to know how I've done it. Here's how I've done it and what I'll bring to the county. I'm tenacious, which you need in a big public institution to get things done. I listen to the front lines, I take action, I get results, and I also hold organizations and myself accountable. So why should voters choose me, and why should the Oregonian endorse me? First, I have a proven track record of taking on big challenges and getting results. On day one of my service, I'll be ready to be an effective leader on the critical issues most important to the community right now: homelessness, mental health and drug treatment access, and neighborhood safety. Second, I'll operate with transparency and accountability, and that's needed to help reestablish trust with the community. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen several things, whether it was a rent assistance issue, with a behavioral health center closing, where that sort of trust with the community has been frayed. And third, and probably most importantly, I know how to build plans, create timelines and measurable goals, and at a certain point, move from talking and planning and shifting into action. And I'm a leader who puts plans into actions. That's been the hallmark of my work. I stick to timelines, I measure results, and make adjustments if needed. Right now, our community needs more effective action and improved results, and I'm the only candidate in the race that can do that. And I ask for your endorsement. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Ana Del Rocio, can you go next?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ana Del Rocio, and I am proudly running to serve as the next Multnomah County Commissioner for the place my two children and I call home, District 3. Our East Portland community has given so much to my family. It's rich in cultural diversity, neighbors, and community organizations coming together to care for one another, and full of small businesses and entrepreneurs who are the backbone of our hyper-local economy. Yet, District 3 still faces threats to our dignity and security, including a lack of housing options, mental illness and addiction, and gun violence. I've worn many hats in this community, from elected school board member to nonprofit leader, and I bring an important lens to the work I do. My life experiences that shape how I approach my work. I'm a daughter of working class immigrants from Peru, the first person in my family to be born in this country, a former teacher, a mother, a renter, and a fierce community advocate. I'm running for Multnomah County Commissioner because District 3, now more than ever, deserves a leader who understands the real challenges we face in East Portland, where the neighbors I speak with often feel forgotten by their government leaders, who direct resources and attention to other, more affluent parts of our county. Just a few weeks ago, I was at a community visioning session in Mill Park, and neighbors were asked what they hoped for their community in 20 years. Do you know what they said? We want to still be here in 20 years. Displaced communities were pushed out to East Portland and are still wondering if they'll be pushed out again. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that communities who are most marginalized were the most harmed in COVID, and they're the ones whose recovery from the pandemic is uneven and slower. We know that the problems we face have been decades long in the making, and we know we can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking that created them. Our government has long been a target of corporate lobbyists. I'm a leader who comes from our communities and is accountable to our communities. I care about the future of all people in our district because I'm raising my family here. What happens here matters. My vision for East Portland goes beyond just having our basic needs met. It includes a thriving ecosystem of small businesses, community centers, arts and culture, climate resilience, and accessible green spaces on both sides of 82nd Avenue. That's why I'm running, because East Portland needs a leader who's willing to put the health and thriving of our communities first. I'll never stop fighting to make sure Multnomah County's best days are ahead of us for your families and mine.
Great, thank you very much. And Albert Kaufman, if you wouldn't mind rounding us out.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Thank you to the Oregonian for having this forum today, and thank you to my opponents who are improving in their public speaking efforts every time we meet. So yesterday we had an opportunity to meet with the Willamette Week, and I just even noticed in the day since that everybody's speaking and pitches are getting better, and hopefully mine is as well. We'll see. If you know my name, you probably know me from the activism that I've been doing in Portland for the last 20 years. You may have agreed with me on some issues, you may have disagreed with me on others, but you know that I have been here for the last 20 years, working on a daily basis to improve our lives. Some of the things that we haven't gotten around to talking about on the campaign trail so far are issues that I've been working on. One of them is wood smoke. Wood smoke is unfortunately providing a lot of additional pollution in our air. And recently we saw folks come together to try to alert the community and alert the county to this problem. And the county did take a swipe at the issue and actually hired someone full-time to work on the issue. Unfortunately, they didn't really follow through with the work. And it seems like people still think it's okay to have campfires, for instance. And it's really not. And so I'm partly running and participating in this campaign to educate people as we go as to some of the major issues that are facing us. Another one that I've been working on and that I think is important is getting rid of gas-powered lawn tools. A group of folks called Quiet Clean PDX, which I've been a part of, has been working for the last 6 years to try to convince the city and the county and neighbors like you to stop using gas-powered tools. And we're finally starting to get some momentum. We just recently had a city-county work group that's been meeting for the last couple of months, and that came out with recommendations to actually ban these tools in our midst. If we're serious about climate change and we don't enjoy having hot summers like we have been experiencing the last couple of years, the county is a great place to take action and to follow through and to protect us from the threats of climate change. And I am running because I believe that as an activist, I have some outside thinking, outside of the box thinking, and actually some inside of the box thinking that I'm excited to share today that I think can be really useful in our community. And whether or not I'm elected, I intend to keep on working on these issues from within the government or from the outside of the government. And thank you again for having us today.
Great, thank you very much. So to rotate the order a little bit, Anna, if you wouldn't mind going first on this question. How would you assess Multnomah County's performance in addressing homelessness over the past few years? And what's the biggest reason we're not seeing more progress?
Would you please repeat the question? The audio cut out a little bit there.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. How would you assess Multnomah County's performance in addressing homelessness over the past few years? And what's the biggest reason we're not seeing more progress?
Thank you for asking. The question of assessment is so important because what we don't want to do is gauge just based on what we're seeing off the streets, how we're doing on the issue overall. The number of tents that we see with our eyes visibly cannot be the core way that we determine whether or not the county is successful. Unhoused neighbors, to have unhoused conditions in our county is not the way we want to operate as a society or as a county. But assessing the true scope of the problem of housing and houselessness will require understanding where are folks in the system as a whole. How are folks experiencing housing insecurity, instability, people who are doubled up? The lack of true accountability and transparency in our progress, measuring our progress, setting success metrics, reporting on our progress is a major hurdle to our county's ability to earn trust from the community and trust from taxpayers. So my assessment is weak and maybe potentially even incomplete because I don't know that we have a solid sense of how we are getting from point A to point B. And more importantly, what our endpoint is, what our goal is, to determine whether or not we are successful. Is it that we don't want to have a single person who's voluntarily or involuntarily unhoused? Do we want to have people in a certain timeline of, maximum time we'll accept someone in temporary shelter before permanent shelter is X number of months? What is our collective goal? The additional hurdle has been lack of leadership in the joint office of housing and homeless services with the city of Portland. Granted, there are many cities and municipalities in the county we need to be working with, but that is something that remains to be realized from its theoretical vision as a collaboration hub. It was intended to be a place where we can really be more effective and efficient with spending, but we've yet to see that actually play out. And at some point, we're going to need to stop and reevaluate and reassess. Is this working? Do we need a different structure, different vehicle to tackle this problem together? We often have this conversation about, is it about immediate temporary shelter increases? Is it about permanent long-term supportive housing increases? We have to do both. We have to make sure that we're managing the current crisis, but we also have to monitor the inflow, make sure it's not getting worse, preventing evictions, making sure that we have affordable housing at all income levels, building our housing supply. These are all core ways we need to improve. But right now, the county needs to majorly improve in how we're communicating our progress and how we're assessing our own internal success and communicating out to the public.
Okay, thank you. Albert, same question for you. How would you assess the county's performance in addressing homelessness, and what's the biggest reason we're not seeing more progress?
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a question that's come up in every discussion that we've had before us. And obviously, it's a challenging issue that touches all of our lives. It's interesting, actually, it doesn't necessarily really touch all of our lives, because depending on where you live and who you are, you may or may not even know that there's a houselessness issue going on in Multnomah County. In my neighborhood, for instance, I think the children who are going to school are somewhat unaware of the issue. The people who are worried about filling their Airbnb or are heading off to the slopes, they just drive by what the problem is. That said, I do think it is up to the county to, the county is the frontline group that is going to make a difference with the city and metro. I tend to think that the issue, first of all, I disagree with the other candidates on this, and I think that the people who are involved in trying to solve this issue are doing their best. And I think this is a nationwide crisis and possibly a world crisis that we're dealing with. And I've been encouraging the county and all of us to be thinking about this as a sort of a meta crisis. I do think that it's to the level that we should be reaching out to the federal government for help from FEMA and from whoever else. And every district, every jurisdiction in the country seems to think that it's just their problem. And there are solutions out there, and there are band-aids, and we can make some improvements. But currently, I really think that this is somewhat beyond the scope of the county's ability to handle it. Some unusual responses or some unusual ideas that I have around this. One is to shut down Airbnb for the time being. I think that is putting a major pressure on housing availability in our community. And there are precedents already in coastal communities in Oregon where the communities have said no more. We cannot handle having Airbnb and Vacasa running and at the same time trying to house people who work in our communities. And one of the things that I alluded to before about thinking inside the box, I'd like to take places like the Walmarts that are closing and potentially use those as shelters. If we actually have an emergency and we think that it's important to house 5,000 people who are out on the streets, we probably could do it. If we had a tornado come through here tomorrow, we would figure out a way to house those people who are houseless. And finally, I think there's also something that we haven't really talked about much yet on the campaign trail, and that is dealing with the investment housing situation that's going on in Portland and beyond. And I think there is some recognition of this as a national issue. That people are investing in property and then letting the property sit vacant. I delivered our neighborhood newsletter for the Richmond Neighborhood Association a number of times, and I would walk by houses that were sitting empty. And this just blows my mind, the fact that there are apartments and houses vacant when there are so many people that could be living in them. And I have lots of other ideas about some alternatives to fixing the situation, but I think those are some of the ideas that I have that I'm thinking about.
Okay, thank you. We will actually go into priorities next, but let's first go to Julia. How would you assess Multnomah County's performance in addressing homelessness, and what's the biggest reason we're not seeing more progress?
Thanks. Well, if I had to give it a letter grade, I would say it's about a C-, and that's not a reflection of the commitment and the hard work of the staff who are in the system every day, working very hard and are very committed to getting better results. But it's a reflection on the lack of progress. What is the biggest reason? There's a whole host of them. You know, we don't have a plan. We don't have specific goals. There hasn't been accountability. We haven't spent all the resources. You know, the fact that last year we ended the county ended the year with a surplus of funds, and yet, you know, there's certainly a demonstrated need in the fact that those funds hadn't been deployed effectively. Another reason is, you know, until last week when the county came up with its first list by name of those that it identified as chronically homeless on the streets, that hadn't existed. So how can we make progress if we don't have a list by name, what services people need, how we're going to connect them to the services? Another piece that's obviously been talked about a lot is the siloing between the city and the county, and the lack of alignment among the planning and the implementation between the two entities that both have overlapping responsibility. And, you know, certainly the other piece that has made it challenging to make progress, which is outside of the county, but certainly the lack of affordable housing, and that we can transition people from the streets to transition shelters, transitional housing, and ultimately permanent housing, is there's not enough capacity. So all those things, some of them squarely in the county's portfolio of work to do, and others that are external factors that have also made it more challenging.
Great, thank you. Albert, if you want to kind of continue a little bit more on this front, you're welcome to, you don't have to, but I guess I'm wondering what would be your top priorities for improving Multnomah County's response if you were elected?
Right. I do think that Julia is on the right track. I do think that there's been a great difference already we're seeing in the current chair of the county, Jessica Vega-Peterson. She has been making progress where the previous chair did not seem to be able to work together with the city. And I'm not saying it's her fault, but it does seem that Jessica Vega-Peterson has been able to coordinate better with the city. I think part of our challenge is cross-jurisdictional collaboration and cooperation. And that is something that I really believe that I can bring to the office. I like playing as a team, I like collaborating, and I like accomplishing things together as a team. That said, you can't do that if the city is not willing to play ball together. And you know, I noticed some of your questions have to do with not in this current forum, but in the written questions that we'll be answering, have to do with, you know, how we feel about Mayor Wheeler's attempts. And I would say that, you know, I think he's under an incredible amount of stress, as is the whole city council. I've considered running for city council before, and I watch what they're going through. I'm very grateful that the charter change is coming, because I think that's going to improve things. But so just the shorter answer is much better cross-jurisdictional cooperation and collaboration. That's what I would say is probably what's missing, but there are also more details as well.
Okay. And in terms of priorities, I guess your top priorities for improving the county's response, Julia, can you respond to that question?
Thank you. I would say that a couple things, not necessarily in the priority order, but they would be the priorities. First of all, to stop pointing the fingers between the city and county, and the working independently of each other. Listening to whether it was Commissioner Myron, now Chair Vega-Peterson, the mayor, they all have ideas. And I think instead of us saying we're only going to pursue one person's idea, we need a whole host of potential solutions, because there's not going to be one thing that solves this. So one of the things is getting the city and county to all look at each other's ideas and embrace them, and, you know, come up with a collection of them, because we need lots of different solutions. This isn't just we find one thing and, you know, the mayor's going to have it, or the county chair is going to have it, but working together, we're going to be able to come up with that. And we need to really coordinate. I'll push for coordination of not only the planning, but program implementation, better braiding together the budgets. You know, and other things I would say is it's certainly important to continue two things that the county has done, which is the rent assistance, which stops people from falling into homelessness. And also on the other end to look at supportive permanent housing. But this piece in the middle, I think, is the one that has the city and the county have wrestled with most, which is we have more than 5,000 people on the streets. How do we move that person from the street into permanent housing? And so the priority for me would be to be building out this continuum, again, with the good ideas that are worthy of pursuing, that have been raised by various city and county leaders, but building this continuum of how do you move someone from the street into shelter or transitional housing, where they're safe off the streets, they're safe, and they have access to basic services, they get stabilized, and they're ready for that next step. So really prioritizing this middle piece, which I think right now there's been a lot of focus on either ends, but not in the centerpiece of how we're going to do it together and build a continuum. And then this sounds so basic, but a priority is like having a joint city county plan that everybody agrees upon, that we know what the respective bodies' responsibilities are, how we're going to use our collective resources against, what the timeline is, so we're all clear on when things are going to happen. That moves us from planning into actually action. And then how are we going to measure the results? And again, that sounds so fundamental, but I don't see that currently. I don't see a plan that moves people from the streets in really inhumane conditions into permanent supportive housing. So those would just be my top priorities, but I have several other ideas, but those would be most important things I think need to be taken, the steps taken right away.
Great, thank you. And Anna, same question for you. What would be your top priorities for improving the county's response?
Thank you. My priorities are the issues that are most important to people in Multnomah County today. And those are housing and homelessness, mental health and addiction treatment, and community safety. However, it is the convergence of these crises that's a problem decades long in the making that we must address. And we need a new direction for our government to do that. We need a renewed sense of urgency for those in power. Last week, actually by now over a week ago, I received a rent increase notice of $209. I rent a small 2-bedroom apartment with my children. Now I have to figure out how to pay more rent with childcare, rising food costs, and monthly bills, or I'll have to move. I share this information because it demonstrates the extent to which I am in touch with the day-to-day realities of people in our county. We need people in office who understand the struggles that communities face and the importance of working earnestly for affordable housing, displacement prevention, and shelter for those who are unhoused. As your next county commissioner, I will work collaboratively with the chair's office, housing advocates, and new joint office leadership. But until we solve the long-term housing supply issue, we must tend to the human element of crisis on our streets. We need safe temporary shelter and supportive housing programs to keep people housed. We need to expand treatment for mental health and addiction and tailor interventions to address the known root causes of mental health and addiction. What we know from the research is that the opposite of addiction is community or connection. Where we see robust healthcare systems and economic security, we also see low levels of mental illness and addiction. But perhaps most importantly, my aim will be to get things done on all these fronts. One of my opponents, Ms. Brim-Edwards, said in an interview yesterday that she would be comfortable being a lone dissenter. That's not good enough for me. I'm not interested in being in opposition for opposition's sake. I'm interested in actually effectively passing innovative policies and responsible budgets. And I can do that with the breadth and depth of the endorsements that I've earned and my proven record of working collaboratively across our region.
So can you kind of specify a little bit? Well,
you mind if I just respond
I
to that
actually want to
since-
follow. I want to follow up on this question. Can you specify, I guess, what you said your priorities would be those of the community, and I guess what I'm wondering is, like, what would be the first things that you address as commissioners specifically on homelessness?
With the new leader in the joint office, I would want to spend a great deal of time with him, really understanding what his vision is, what his plan is. I assume that there is already something for me to be briefed on, and not just come in and propose new ideas as if there aren't already, as Mr. Kaufman said, a great deal of people who are well-intentioned, who are experienced experts crafting these plans. The problem is these plans aren't being communicated very widely. So it will be my job to sit and understand what is happening, to build the bridge between what's happening and the community, the stakeholders, and then really make sure that we are collaborating with not just this current city council, but those to come in the new charter reform change, to have the maximum impact for folks who are experiencing especially unhoused conditions, and to make sure that we are implementing new initiatives responsibly. We have a lot of initiatives, not just on the housing and homelessness front, but also preschool for all. We need to make sure that these model programs, really amazing research proven programs to impact long-term economic security, are implemented responsibly and safely. And right now that's not really happening across the board. So it will be my job to go in and understand, as one of many commissioners, again, working on a body. I can't do a great deal independently, nor would I want to, but it's my job to be the bridge, the convener, the communicator, and really understand where the county is headed under the new direction of the chair. But it will be essential to make sure that we are convening a broad table of stakeholders, not just directly impacted folks, but also folks who are coming from other regions, who may have expertise that we haven't honed yet in Oregon. Oregon is quite insular by design. So opening up bridges beyond our borders and really having the most experienced expertise at the table to guide us forward.
And so your feeling is that there are plans, but they're just not being communicated well enough to the public?
I do feel that way. Knowing and from my experience working at the county, my tenure as a county official precedes that of any sitting commissioner, even the chair. I'm sure there are very good reasons why why plans have been implemented in a certain way, but those plan to actuals, budget to actuals, those aren't well communicated, and they will be my job to understand why and to really improve that communication with the public.
Okay. Let's see. Julia, let's start with you on this question. The county has.
Can I just briefly
Very
respond to the reference? Because I think it was taken out of context that I'd be comfortable being the lone no vote. So if you've watched the school district for the last 9 years, yes, I am sometimes a lone no vote. Sometimes there's somebody else with me. But often I'm doing that. It's a principled stand, and I'm not a rubber stamp. I think all too often in public bodies, everybody gets like, we all want to be unanimous, and we vote for, and people vote for things that they don't actually believe in, or they don't have, there's no substance behind it, or they've been spoon-fed sanitized information. And I always demand that if somebody's bringing something forward, that they don't just get my vote because I'm a rubber stamp, or I'm just going to go along with it because I want to be like part of the group. And often a no vote on something sends a message to staff and the larger community that there's a fundamental issue at play. And I've often seen where a no vote actually changes the long-term trajectory and outcome of an issue. And so I'm never just going to be a yes vote. And I see that actually a little bit too often at the county commission, where everybody's for it, and then afterwards, when things fall apart, everybody asks why it fell apart. Because nobody put sort of pressure tested the idea, or they just accepted information that wasn't well thought out or wasn't ready to be implemented. Okay. So I will always be somebody who will cast my vote based on the sort of the facts at hand.
Okay, thank you. I believe you're first on this question. The county has resisted the city's requests for funding Mayor Wheeler's sanctioned camping proposal, despite having surplus funds last year and spending only half its budgeted amount of Metro funds this fiscal year, for the first half of this fiscal year. Under former Chair Kafori, the county has also told the city it won't cover the costs of Safe Rest Villages once federal funds run out. Do you think the county is right to refuse to take on the cost of these shelters?
if I'm on the county commission, I'm going to be a partner with the city, and I will support the city. Again, this is one solution. It's not the solution to the whole problem. So we shouldn't think of if the county funds that's the end solution, but it's one piece. And just like I expect the city to support the county on some of its potential solutions and alternative shelter options. And if we continue this, you guys go do your own thing. And if you fail, you know, that's on the city, and we're going to do our own thing over here. That is not how we're going to effectively move ahead. And I don't think I think the community is fed up with that being the attitude from elected leaders. So I will be a strong supporter. And the other thing I will do is, if the city brings other ideas forward, I'm always somebody who asks lots of questions, looks at the data, pressure tests ideas, which is exactly what I do. I won't just rubber stamp an idea that comes from the city, but you know, certainly if they have a solution that's worth supporting, that helps us move it forward, that makes measurable progress, absolutely, I'll be supportive.
Thank you.
This is all our community. It's not, I mean, District 3, the district that we're running for, is entirely within the city of Portland. But we should just need to remember that. So we need to be partners with the city of Portland.
Great, thank you. Anna, same question for you. The county has resisted the city's request for funding Mayor Wheeler's sanctioned camping proposal, despite having surplus funds and spending only half its budgeted amount for the first half of the fiscal year. The county has also previously told the city it won't cover the cost of safe rest villages once federal funds expire. Do you think the county is right to refuse to take on the cost of these shelters?
I think the county was right to request a proof of concept. Again, I think it's so important when we're talking about taxpayer dollars to steward those dollars and to make sure we're making the most responsible investments possible. The original proposal through Mayor Wheeler's office of those large mass campsites were not research backed. And I know that this is an important issue for this paper, especially having sent reporters to Los Angeles to study, you know, the camp situation. I used to live in LA. I know that these tent cities don't work. They don't actually solve the problem. And the chair was responsible in asking for more information, for more backing before investing taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. We didn't get that proof of concept. The plans then changed and morphed. I do believe, again, going back to my earlier response, that the fact that there are unspent dollars, there is a reason why those dollars were not spent. And I want to know why. What is the reason? Before just using that as a basis to spend without any proof of a given initiative's viability or feasibility would not be the answer. So I don't think those two things necessarily go together, that because there's a surplus of funds, we should spend it on XYZ idea if that idea has not been well thought out. So I do believe that we need to partner with the city. And that will include exploring different creative options. But this kind of specific option out of the mayor's office around the mass campsites was not the direction we need to go. It will not work to solve our long-term housing problem. In different iterations, possibly. Smaller sites, not tents, but the way it was initially proposed, no, I don't think that it was fundable, justifiably fundable. And I believe the county is right to think very critically about where it makes its next move.
And how about with the safe rest villages, which are up and running now?
With those, I mean, I think that the chair is doing, the current chair right now is really on her way to having a much more community involved process. And in terms of knowing the kinds of ideas that are working or not working, those are different than the campsite. So that would be something I have more questions about. I want to go back to the joint office and ask, inquire as to why that is. But I do think that those are more viable or feasible than the mass campsites.
I'm sorry, can you say that last part again, that you think they're more viable than the?
Yes, than the mass campsites.
Okay, great, thank you. Albert, same question for you. Do you want me to repeat it? It's basically about the county's reluctance to fund the Wheeler site as well as safe rest villages.
Right. So I think I agree. I think we're somewhat in agreement on this question. And I also just want to say that, I'm not on the county commission at the moment. And so I am trusting that the leadership of Chair Jacob Peterson is probably some of the best thinking in our region on this topic. As an activist who's been working to try to get the city and the county to do various things, I have noticed that the city seems to be a place where good ideas go to die. I'm very much looking forward to the change in our charter and a new city council, because until then, I don't really have the faith in the city to make good decisions and move forward in a good way. I'm afraid that we're not going to get to a topic that does really interest me that's not exactly related to this, so I'm going to bring it up here, and that is guns. We haven't really talked about that much on the campaign trail. If I am elected, I would like to push for no more gun shows in our region. I would like to close gun stores in our region, and I would like to instigate an active buyback program for our region. And this doesn't have to wait for me to become elected. Any of these ideas are open and fair game for the public and for our elected officials to take on. But I think that and fentanyl are two of the really big drivers of the reason that people are not feeling safe and the reason that people are dying on the streets. And I agree that houselessness and these questions that you're asking are important. And every organization we're coming before is asking the same questions, and those are top of mind. And there's only so much that the county and city can do to rectify it. And we have to deal with all the other things that are a problem in our city and our county. And guns are a huge part of the problem. When people are nervous about bringing their children to school, when I'm nervous about being downtown yesterday, because who knows what's going to happen. And of course, this is also a national problem. This is not just in Portland, but I think there are things that a county and a city can do to make things safer. One of them is to stop having gun shows in our region. And I think that is something that the city and county could agree to do and take care of and make happen.
Great, thank you very much. Anna, I think you're first on this question. And we are switching topics a bit to yet another huge thorny issue, and that's behavioral health. What are the county's biggest needs, and how would you seek to meet them in terms of behavioral health?
Behavioral health, mental health and addiction treatment specifically, really is our charge uniquely at the county. We do work collaboratively with other jurisdictions on housing and other kinds of issues, but uniquely for Multnomah County as a local public health authority, this is where we must continue to shine. This is where we really need to beef up our programming and our delivery of services. I will say that the county already does a great deal in terms of being the social safety net on people's toughest days, whether they're experiencing a mental health crisis. The county has been there and will continue to be there because that is our job as a social infrastructure, as a direct service provider. However, even though, as I believe it was Mr. Kaufman pointed out, we are part of a nationwide and global housing and homelessness crisis, we have been in the Pacific Northwest regionally facing a mental health and addiction crisis for some time now. And we need to ask ourselves, what are the drivers? What are the environmental, cultural, social, structural drivers that are creating such poor outcomes in mental illness and addiction? We know we don't have enough treatment beds. We don't have enough providers. We don't have culturally specific providers. We don't have the partnerships that we need with providers on the ground to make our health department a true partner. In my conversations with community members, I've discovered that the partnerships that providers have with Clackamas County and Washington County are quite distinct from those they have with Multnomah County. Our health department has a long way to go to be viewed as a true partner to providers, to really make sure that we are complementing any and all initiatives to address housing and homelessness with a robust behavioral health part of that. There's much controversy about housing first. Is it the right approach or not? What I remind people often is that housing first doesn't mean housing only. Housing first, and then what is second, third, and fourth? A lot of it will have to do with robust behavioral health treatment. And that is where our county has to really radically redefine how we are developing this workforce. We have a shortage. We need to make sure that we are looking to pipelines. We are looking at retention efforts. There's a high rate of attrition and also acuities through the roof. So we need to make sure that we are addressing that by developing our workforce, building other kinds of treatment models. We traditionally have a one-to-one treatment model in mental health and addictions that is simply not sustainable. We cannot create spots for every single person to have a one-to-one provider. We have to explore collective, group-based models, different kinds of models to meet the growing need. And more importantly, look beneath that growing need. How are we going to address the root drivers and not just continue to fund programs to meet what we're going to be counting on as a growing need? We have to get up ahead of that growing need.
Okay, thank you. Albert, same question for you. What are the county's biggest needs in behavioral health, and how would you seek to meet them?
All right. Well, great answer previous to this. I think that, we are all recognizing that we have a shortage of frontline workers. I think the pandemic has stressed out not just folks in behavioral health. I know a few of them. I know people who work at the county, and they have been at it for a long time. They made it through the pandemic, and many of them are just burned out and underpaid. And so we definitely have an issue ahead of us. We also suffer because the state closed its mental health programs and hospitals, and that I think has really affected the number of people who are on the streets and the number of people who are just challenged. As I've talked about on the campaign trail so far, we've also just went through a pandemic and are still kind of coming out of it, and that has made, I think, more people have been pushed to the edge, both people who work in the field and people who are on the receiving end of treatment. I have been calling for, we obviously need to increase funding for the staffs in this kind of work. I think Portland is an incredible training ground for this work. We have, schools in acupuncture and massage and in all sorts of different healing arts. Psilocybin healing that's going on here is probably some of the best in the country. So I do think that is a route to success. If we continue to encourage more training happening in Portland, I think we may also retain more workers who are in that world. One of the odd ideas I've had, and I haven't mentioned this yet so far, but I do think that regarding fentanyl and people dying from that, an idea I've been having and I've been running by my folks who've been helping me with the campaign and just friends is given that we have an excessive amount of cannabis in the state, and very good cannabis, by the way. I hate to sound like Trump, but I feel like I just did. Anyway, given that we have this amount of cannabis, I think that it behooves us to figure out how to get it into the hands of people who are using much harder drugs on the streets. I know that might sound like a real stretch, but I think it actually could be a solution. This is often used as a way to get people off of hard drugs, is to give them cannabis. And so if I was to become commissioner, and even if I don't become commissioner, this is an idea that I'd like to expand on, and I'd like to figure out how to make happen. I think that people who are stoned on cannabis versus high on fentanyl or meth or heroin are much easier to deal with, and I think will become less of a challenge to find housing for and other problems. So that's a long answer to your question. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to stop the recording for just 1 minute for a change of venue. Great, and same question for you, Julia. What are the county's biggest needs on behavioral health, and how would you seek to meet them?
Yeah, I'm going to take them separately, and I could talk for a long time on this issue because they're big, complex issues. But if I were to just summarize what I see as both fronts, I'll start with mental health. It's been underfunded. As Anna said, it is a core responsibility of the county. We don't have a functional behavioral health system. And as a county commissioner, I'd be looking at the chair's budget that she's going to be introducing in the next couple of weeks about whether there's that investment in mental health services. We need an expanded system for both inpatient and outpatient. We also need to make sure that it's not a standalone mental health system, but that because we know many people who are on the streets need mental health services, so that we're starting to integrate mental health with both shelters, transitional housing, and then of course to permanent supportive housing. We also, as Anna mentioned, there is the need to invest in capacity. Right now, the wages for entry-level mental health professionals, whether peer support or support people or outreach workers, the wages are not enough to keep and retain people. And really, if we're going to have sustained outreach, we need to have a consistent group of people who are engaging with people, because it can't just be people cycling in and out, because so much of this is based on relationships. In addition, I would look at how and be an advocate of better coordination. This is another city-county piece, but for the non-police response to mental health issues. For example, if it's non-acute, those 911 calls gets dispatched to Portland Street Response. If it's acute, Project Respond, which is the county service for people in mental health crisis. And right now, depending on what time of day you call, what the situation is, there may be a timely response from one of those two, and it may be effective, but maybe not. And so making sure that when there is an emergency and people need support, that the system is coordinated so that they either get a timely response from Portland Street Response or Project Respond, super critical. Switching to drug treatment, again, this is a place where there's not a continuum in place. And, I look at ballot measure 110, and I think many people voted for it was going to have the promise of treatment. And not only do we not have a treatment, but if you look along the continuum, we have huge gaps. You should have prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. And none of those pieces of the continuum is the county currently doing a good job. So that's another thing I'd look for in the county chair's budget. How are we creating this continuum? I went out on a ride along with Portland Street Response, and one of their big issues is there's no place, if somebody wants to get into or needs to get into detox, there's no place to take them. There's no sobering center. So we're missing some really critical links. And this is another one of those things that the county and the city have been talking about it for a long time, but they need to move to action, because if you're one of those first responders and somebody needs to go to a sobering center, there's currently no place to take them. The other piece is I'm hopeful the legislature has taken some steps to fix ballot measure 110. It was a disaster in terms of its implementation. But again, you can pass a piece of legislation, and if it's not implemented well, that doesn't solve the problem. So I'll be very interested as once the bill passes to fix some of the issues that were in place, which resulted in not very many people getting treatment, that it's well implemented at the local level. And that again, it runs the continuum. And then finally, the last piece of this, it sort of ties into public safety. And I would support the DA. We've had too many deaths related to drug overdoses. And as somebody who's on the Portland School Board, who we've had 3 students in the last year and a half die of overdoses, 2 at McDaniels and 1 this year at Franklin. I'll be supportive of the DA and local law enforcement pursuing and charging dealers who are responsible for crime, drug-related deaths. And I've talked to the DA about this because there's not a set of consequences for those in the system that are really, their actions are leading to the death of lots of young people and people on the street. And that is something we can take action about. And I'll push for that. And again, that'll be something I'll be looking for in the chair's budget.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, Albert, you're first on this question. And actually you've already anticipated some of this, but I'm wondering, what actions do you think the county should take to improve public safety, whether it's on its own or in concert with the city?
So I talked a little bit about my ideas around guns. I think that's probably the highest priority, is that. But when we think about public safety, we should also be thinking about climate change. Part of living anywhere is hopefully having a thriving life, hopefully having a long, healthy, adventurous, fun, interesting, and might I say, musical life. Something I've been trying to do during the campaign is bring music into every appearance. So to have this fun and interesting and thriving life, it behooves us to take action to limit the amount of carbon that we're putting into the air. Even though we're talking about public safety, I think of public safety as things like protecting ourselves from, future heat dome events, which are likely coming. We have a very short attention span, and we forget what last summer was like and what previous summers were like. But I live in an old house that's very drafty, and I remember the first time that the smoke came, and I ended up being in this room that I'm in right now for 10 days straight, afraid to go outside. And not just afraid to go outside, but it was dangerous to go outside. That's public safety. And so if we're serious about this, we'll do everything we can to get trees into the ground. This is one of my big pet peeves with the city of Portland. They canceled the contract with Friends of Trees a couple of years ago, and now we have missed planting seasons for 2 years in a row because of this. And this is because of insider politics that I'm not going to go into. Unfortunately, I know too much about this, but this is something that is going to change very soon. Everyone's going to be very surprised about how much money is suddenly going to roll into planting trees around our region. And in fact, the Oregonian the other day had this front page article about how cities around the country are getting all excited about planting trees. Well, gosh, they could have just looked at Portland and had someone in Portland write this article. So, in regards to this as well, I think people like Mary Pevito of Neighbors for Clean Air have been leading the charge to try to get diesel out of our midst and to change over the dirty trucks that are rolling through our city. So many people in the city are breathing some of the worst air in the country, and she has been doing a great job to ring the bell and to alert people. I wish the county would take her very seriously, and everyone else that's working to clean our air. And we can talk about clean water as well. I think that's a public safety issue too, but I think the main one that we're suffering through is a lot of dirty air. And so I would like to clean the air.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, I think it now goes to you, Julia, and then to Anna.
Thank you. I'm glad you raised this issue because there are neighborhoods in District 3 that are disproportionately impacted by this, that don't have safe neighborhoods. And example, I went into the 911 data calls from last year, and if you look on the west side of the river, typical neighborhood, Bridal Mile, the number of dispatch calls is about 500 last year. As you move to the river and then cross the river and start moving east, when you get to Lentz, it's 8,700 calls. And if you go to Hazelwood and Powellhurst, the numbers are even higher. So that's crime, that's, just a whole variety of things, but those are 911 dispatch calls. And just look at that disparity. And that's true across even District 3, there's disparity. So this is top of mind for many people, for our neighbors and our community. Gun violence being at a record level. I'm gonna sound like a repeat, but this is another case of us having to, I will really push for tighter coordination with the city, because the city has some responsibilities and the county has some pieces. So the county has the, obviously the district attorney's office in the budget, and also the sheriff's office, and we need better coordination. I'm going to be an advocate for more public safety staffing, whether that's the fire department, which responds to a lot of 911 calls, the Portland Police Bureau, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, so that, because when people call 911, they're calling because they need help and they expect a timely, effective response. So better staffing so that we actually, people get calls. Again, local, this is another issue for local businesses. If you have a routine burglary or something happen at your business, the likelihood that the police are going to show up is not high if there's gunfire somewhere else in the city. So that's one thing. In addition, I'll also be an advocate for very targeted increases in the district attorney's budget, so that they can get after some of the sort of repeat property crime. We have people cycling through the system continuously, and also to be able to prosecute violent crimes, because this is another, with gun violence in our neighborhoods, reason why people don't feel safe. And there's a reason they don't feel safe if you look at the data. In addition, so increasing the budgets for both the sheriff's office and the DA's office in targeted ways will allow the district attorney to investigate and prosecute. And if needed, that we'll have the jail bed be able to utilize jail bed capacity. But if we're constricting budgets at the time when the DA is saying, or the sheriff is saying, they don't have the resources to investigate and prosecute crimes, then that should be prioritized in the budget. And then just I want to speak to an issue that's not at the county, but impacts the county, and that is the public defenders, the lack of public defenders. And that's bad for two reasons. One, if you've been accused of a crime and you don't have a public defender, you're not really having access to our justice system. And then obviously second as well, if there's not any public defenders, cases that really should be prosecuted are being dropped. So I'll be an advocate. I have been, and I will be an advocate with the state that this is a state responsibility to support the counties. It's really particular to Washington County and Multnomah County, but that we need that critical piece of the system, because right now we have big gaps in our public safety system. And if we don't fill those gaps, better coordinate and better staff sort of our first responders, we're not going to be able to improve neighborhood safety.
Great. Okay. And Anna, same question for you. What would you do on, what steps do you think the county should take to improve public safety?
Thank you. I appreciate my opponent's holistic and cross-jurisdictional perspectives on the issue. I was glad to hear Mary Pivoto's name. I earned her endorsement. She's the director of Neighbors for Clean Air, as well as the Moms Demand Action Gun Stance Candidate Distinction, because safety is the set of issues around public safety are so core to my platform and my vision for what we need in our communities. You know, as former policy staff to current Chair Vega Peterson, I know the intricacies of our county government and what it takes to collaborate and pull levers to get things done. The quick answer to your question is definitely fully funding the district attorney's office and making sure that we're collaborating with the new sheriff, whose vision I think is really inspiring for how we're going to improve public safety in the county. We don't have any direct control, but that does not mean that we don't have power and influence to make sure that public safety undergirds all other programs and services at the county. It is so essential. I view these budgets as moral documents where we place our investments as a reflection of what we care about. No other initiative that we take on will succeed if people don't feel safe walking to the libraries, walking to SUN programs. As long as the county is not investing in public safety for all, we're not going to be successful. And having that vision of putting people first is such a core part of my platform and my candidacy. One of my opponents, Ms. Brim-Edwards, revealed yesterday that she still works for a Fortune 100 company that manufactures clothing and shoes, where profits are more important than people. But right now, the most urgent work of the county is to put people first and improve the lives and the safety of our most vulnerable residents. I will not bring any toxic corporate culture to the county. Instead, what I will bring is the endorsements of 8 current and former county commissioners, including 2 chairs, because they know I'm the candidate who's best prepared to lead our district forward, not just on public safety, but all issues the county works on.
So just to kind of hone in a little bit more on your answer regarding public safety, you talked about collaborating with the sheriff and the DA, but can you give any more, I guess, detail or specificity to what it is that you think are some of the pieces that are lacking that you would put your attention to beyond collaborating with them?
Sure. Similarly to the workforce issues in behavioral health, we have major workforce issues in public safety as well, not just for officers, law enforcement officers, but also for first responders. We don't have a way to address the vicarious trauma that folks are experiencing, to recruit, fill vacant positions. If we don't have the staff to ensure public safety happens at every step of the way, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. So making sure that we're working with the DA to recruit defenders who are going to hold people accountable, to make sure that we are recruiting officers and training them appropriately. I heard through the sheriff's office that they have wonderful new ideas for diversity and inclusion to make sure that there's enough training so that safety and policing happens in a safe way. Where we are directing, where we are deploying people across the county also needs to be equitable. We can't just distribute numbers of officers in the same way across every district. We have to figure out as Ms. Brim-Edwards was saying, where are the hotspots, and then direct our capacity there, collaborating with the city and the sheriff's office to make sure that we're deploying people equitably. One other thing that I would take a look at is, what are the drivers of violence? We know that gun violence spikes, violent crimes spike as a symptom of poor material conditions, poor day-to-day living conditions. How can the county come in and make sure that we're looking at the data and supporting through our service programs what we know are preventative factors, youth violence prevention programs? I won an award from the prior county chair Kafori's office for my work preserving and expanding youth violence prevention programs. That 18 to 24 demographic, that's a place where we can really spend more to make sure that we're preventing down the road more increases in violent behavior.
So we are pretty much out of time. I would like to ask 2 more questions, but if you can keep it to like as short of a response as possible. And I can't remember, I think, Julia, do you go first on this question? Yes. Oh, wait. I lost track of who goes first.
I think I went first the last time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Julia, question for you. And this is a real quick question. What skills or characteristics do you bring to the commission that it does not currently have?
That's a great question. I think I'll bring a perspective. I've been at East Portlander for almost 40 years. I also will bring 30 years of public service to the work. I know how government at all levels works: federal, state, local. And I think the other thing I'll bring is I have a long track record of effectively moving both policies, reviewing, and implementing things in coordination with the community and with the private sector. And I'll bring that. I think I can bring the most diverse set of stakeholders to the table to bring solutions to our most pressing problems. And I don't think anybody else has the breadth of experience, both in public service and also in the private sector, that I would bring.
And Anna, same question for you. What skills or characteristics do you bring that the commission doesn't currently have?
I am a trailblazer and I get things done. I first ran for office to solve a problem in my neighborhood in terms of lack of healthcare access. At that time, the community rallied behind me, including Governor Barbara Roberts and Planned Parenthood, because they knew that I would fight for them, especially with someone like Donald Trump in public office. I bring directly relevant experience, a track record of accomplishments, and a broad community backing to meet the complex issues that we face. I'm known for bringing people together to get results on issues that matter most. And among all candidates running, I've earned the broadest and deepest coalition of endorsers, including from the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, Vote Pro-Choice, the Oregon Working Families Party, the Oregon State Council for Retired Citizens, the Joint Council of Teamsters 37, and many more, along with elected and appointed leaders from every level of government, from school board to Congress.
And Albert.
Thank you. I believe I bring to the job an ability to think about everyone in the region. I have been advocating for a variety of different issues as long as I've lived here, and before I lived here. I moved here 21 years ago from Seattle, and before that I was doing similar work, trying to make the world a better place. And I know that just sounds very simple and trite, but it's actually what I do on a daily basis. Today, for instance, I stepped outside and they're replacing telephone poles in my neighborhood. And so in the next couple of days, there's going to be a telephone pole in front of my house that will switch out to a different one. And the man putting together the project was outside with his truck running. And I went out and I talked to him and I said, you know, your truck is running. Is there any reason that the truck is running? And he ran through a few different reasons why the truck was running. And eventually it turned out that he's just using it to power the LED lights that are blinking to warn people not to hit him. Well, you don't actually need to be running the truck to run LED blinking lights. So I contacted the organization that he works for, and they are actually going to discuss it at a company-wide meeting this Friday. And so that's the kind of tenacity that I have. I don't mind getting involved with difficult conversations. I don't mind thinking about big things. I worked in Seattle to try to change the routes of airplanes that were landing, that were severely negatively impacting the neighborhood that I lived in there. And we actually had some success. And so I was going up against the FAA. So I also understand how different levels of government work and don't work. And I'm interested in figuring out how to continue to make Portland a better place to live. We're severely challenged at the moment by a number of the issues that we've been talking about today. And I believe that I will bring an outside perspective that is not typical, both to the commission as well as the city in general. And I think that could be a welcome breath of fresh air. Part of that is also derived from having gone to Burning Man 14 times and having been part of the festival culture and the healing culture in our community. This is a very different kind of perspective than one where, I've been on inside politics. Not to say that I'm an outsider, I know everybody's name, and I think I have a reputation in our community that will hopefully carry me to success, but even not, that I think is a valuable asset in our community.
Okay. I hesitate to ask this because I know this isn't going to be as quick as I'd like it to be, but I think it is important. I'm wondering if each of you, and I think Anna, you start with this one or two of your most significant successes that you had a hand in directly accomplishing.
One of them was around improving the access to healthcare in my neighborhood. Back in 2017, I remember sitting through briefings at the county from the health department around the rates of unintended pregnancy in the East County neighborhoods that I lived in. And they were associating that with a board policy that was in direct contravention to what the community had demanded in terms of service availability in that local school-based health clinic in David Douglas. So I ran for office to solve that problem, and I delivered. One of the first things that we did was changing the availability of services in that clinic, which served the community at large. I then went on to work for the chair, and we accomplished a great deal in economic security and in terms of legislative policies and county policies. But most recently, when I co-chaired the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee, we heard loud and clear from our public safety subcommittee that the community was demanding more accountability and transparency on the public safety front in how we conduct jails and jail oversight programs. We had been failing miserably in the public health, in terms of public health, in terms of human rights, looking at conditions in our jails. And we're talking about the number of jail beds, if they're full or they're not full. We need to also be thinking about what are the experiences and what is the humane conditions that we are really overlooking and spending taxpayer dollars on in our jail facilities. So we proposed a jail oversight plan that voters overwhelmingly adopted because they knew as well as we did that we needed to improve the way public safety functioned, and we need to do everything that we can to advance a more equitable, racially just way forward in criminal justice in our county.
Great, thank you. Albert, one or two quick, most significant accomplishments that you've had a hand in?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, for the last 6 years, I've been working with a group, Quiet Clean PDX, to ban gas-powered leaf blowers. We have other goals as well, but we've been working, and part of what I've been adding to that equation is my understanding of marketing and my understanding of outreach. I will probably be the most known commissioner that the city has ever seen because I am very good at getting the word out about things. So we used everything from social media to email marketing, to websites, to actual physical pieces of paper, and lots of one-on-one outreach. And you may not have noticed it, but in the last couple of years, Portland has gotten a lot quieter. I'm actually surprised. This is one of the first meetings that I'm having on Zoom where I'm not hearing a gas-powered leaf blower in the distance. And the less that we hear of those kind of tools, it's a sign to me that the work that I've been doing is a success. The more times we hear birds chirping and we see people using other kinds of tools, the more I know that the health of the people who are using those tools is going to be improved. No one's thinking about someone who's using a leaf blower and where they're going to be in 10 years, but they're probably going to be deaf and they might also have other health problems as well. And so it gives me great joy to know that that work has happened, and I will continue to do that work at the county if I am elected.
Thank you. And finally, Julia.
Yeah, I'm going to run through some things pretty quickly. So I led a coalition effort to pass legislation that required PE to be offered in schools. Twice I ran for the school board when PPS was in crisis and brought it back and got it back on track and stabilized the district. I played a key role in every single local option and every bond for the last 20 years locally, including the effort in 2003 in which we provided critical funding for all of Multnomah County schools when we were in the midst of the recession. I built the Coalition for the Common Good, which was a business labor coalition that delivered the Student Success Act, helped create the funding mechanism for that, which was a historic investment in schools, public schools, probably the biggest investment in the last 50 years. Let's see. I've also, this is more just an individual thing, is that I led the efforts to ensure that every community in Portland Public Schools, every high school had equitable access to a high quality track and field. Lincoln was on track to have the only artificial turf and track and field in the city. And I, for 10 years, led the fundraising efforts to ensure that every high school had that. So every student had a place to play, and it was equitable, and a host of other things, but that would be, oh, and I also built the business case for marriage equality, that it wasn't a social issue, it was actually an issue that business should care about and advocate for. Built an Oregon coalition, and also built a national business coalition to support marriage equality, submitted amicus briefs to the Supreme Court and also to the Oregon courts, which supported the efforts to deliver marriage equality.
Great, thanks very much. I did not leave you guys. In fact, we went way over. I am perfectly happy to let you guys do a 1-minute closing if you want. I totally understand if you guys have other things to do. It's either all or none. So it's whatever, if you guys have the time or not. And Julia, Anna?
I'm fine.
Yeah, okay. Then I think, Anna, you go first on this.
Sure, thank you. I'm very happy to have been part of this interview today. I think it's so important that we be really uplifting the importance of who is in office in these local county commission roles. I hear often on the campaign trail that, oh, well, not a lot of folks know what the county does. I actually think that many people do know what the county does, because again, the county has been there for them on some of their toughest days, whether that's in an eviction notice, a mental health crisis, an animal rescue, a day in court. Who is in these local positions matters. And what I bring to the table is directly relevant experience, someone who comes from the community, is accountable to our communities, and will make sure that we are bringing broad coalitions of stakeholders together to work collaboratively to advance solutions to regional problems. I've earned the most endorsements of any candidate in the race, and I'm prepared to lead with a race forward mindset and to really center those who are most directly impacted. I'm very open to answering any follow-up questions that you have or that anyone who's watching this has later on. You can visit my website, anadelrocio.com, or email me, anna@anadelrocio.com. My door is open, and I look forward to serving you as your next county commissioner for District 3.
Okay, Julia and then Albert.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the time today. I'm just going to close by saying I'm an East Portlander at heart, and I share East Portlanders' values, and I'll fight for them on the county commission. I'll elevate their voice. I know they often feel like county government doesn't hear their concerns. I'm going to bring urgency, as I always do when I come to the issues of the day, an urgency to not only about the problems, but also to take action. And I'm the one candidate in this race who time and time again, when there's been issues before the community, has stepped up and raised my hand, worked with others. Sometimes I had to get my elbows out to get things done. And but that's what's needed. That's what I've done. And I would ask for your endorsement, because I believe I can help the county get back on track and help solve and address our most critical issues that are facing us today, because we are currently on the wrong track, and we need to make this a community that we all want to live, work, and raise our families in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Albert.
Thank you to the Oregonian for having us today. It's been a real pleasure. I think it's been very educational to me to be running for office for the first time in my life. I'm 61, and I have been political for most of that time. I started when I was 13, working for the United Farm Workers to protest against grapes in my neighborhood. And I've always thought it would be great to run for office, and I've been happily surprised at what an interesting experience it is, both as an opportunity to share my ideas that I have that pertain to our community today, but also just as a personal growth effort and experience for myself, to kick my own butt in a way, to show up for the various forums, to answer your questions in writing, and just to do all of the things that it takes to run. And I want to encourage anyone that has made it this far in our video to consider running for office, for the reasons that I just mentioned, but also probably because if you've been attracted to live in this community, I bet you're just as smart as any of us, and I bet you have some great ideas, and it will do you good to join in. There's going to be an opportunity in 2 years to actually in a year to run for city council, and there's going to be a lot of open seats. So if you're hearing my words, please do consider running for that office or a different one. I'm excited to continue campaigning for the next month with my opponents and to continue learning more about both of them. They're both fascinating, and also to continue learning about the issues that affect our community, and hopefully to be able to make a difference in our community that I will be proud of, and hopefully others will be as well.
Great. Thank you again to all of you for making the time and for talking with us today. We'll be in touch with any follow-up questions. But again, thanks so much.